A major consideration of moving to cloud services is the cost. By taking the time to plan your environment, you can more closely predict and manage those costs. And the first thing we need to look at is the purchasing options for Azure. There are 3 ways we can purchase Azure. There's the Web Direct method, in which a customer or company can purchase directly from the Azure website. This does require a credit card, and you will be billed monthly. Next, we have the Cloud Solution Provider, CSP method. When we purchase Azure this way, we actually purchase it from a CSP, which is a Microsoft partner that offers Azure solutions. The billing is all handled through the CSP, and the CSP can help you build the solutions as they have the experience and expertise, and they may offer that to you as part of their services. And finally, there are enterprise agreements. These are only available for large enterprises, and it requires signing a contract with Microsoft. And when this contract is signed, it means that the enterprise is committing to spending a specified amount on Azure services. And in this case, the customer or the enterprise is billed annually. There are several factors that can affect the costs in Azure. And the first factor is the actual resource type itself. Each resource has a specific cost associated with it. And even within the resource itself, there could be different costs associated with it based on the size or the type of resource it is. The services you receive can also affect the costs, because these rates will vary between your Cloud Solution Provider, or CSP, Web Direct, and the enterprise agreements. And finally, something you may not think about, but the actual location on where the service is provisioned can affect the cost, because the cost will vary between locations. Next, I'm going to touch on billing zones. And we talked about zones for availability in a previous lesson. Those zones are used for high availability. Zones for billing are used to predict costs for data leaving a zone. One thing you need to understand is typically Microsoft does not bill you for data that is entering a data center or ingress. But they will charge you for data that leaves the data center. That's egress. And the cost of that data leaving the data center is based on a zone. A zone is a geographical grouping, and there are 4 zones. Zone 1 includes West and East US and Europe and a few other locations. Zone 2 includes Australia, Central, Japan West, Central India, and a few other locations. Zone 3 is Brazil South only. There are no other locations within Zone 3. And the same goes for DE Zone 1. It only contains Germany Central and Germany Northeast. Let's move on to the always tricky topic of predicting costs in Azure. One of the best places to start in predicting your costs when you move to Azure is with the online pricing calculator. Here, you can build custom quotes. You can save estimates. The calculator will even provide example scenarios for you to work with. One thing I do want to stress here is that the pricing calculator does not equal an actual bill. This will give you an estimate and only an estimate. Another great tool is the Total Cost of Ownership, or TCO calculator. Again, this is another online calculator that's available to you. The TCO calculator predicts the cost savings by migrating from on-premises to Azure, and it will provide you a comparison between the on-premises costs to running those services in Azure. Once your Azure solution is up and running, you can use Azure Cost Management to help predict future costs of your services. It does this by analyzing the cloud costs. It will allow you to create budgets so you'll know when you're hitting the upper limit of your spend. And the Azure Cost Management service will help you optimize what you're currently running by providing recommendations. And you can see in my example here, the recommendation is we delete a public IP address because it's not being used. Microsoft does have some best practices for reducing costs. You can use the existing services, and we've talked about these already. You can use the Azure Pricing Calculator, the TCO calculator, and cost analysis. You can also use the Azure Advisor and implement recommendations, as we just saw. Another way you can analyze and identify costs is by tagging your resources. and you can do this to identify an owner or department. You can also set spending limits and quotas on certain Azure subscriptions. Not every subscription allows you to set a spending limit or quota. For those subscriptions that do not allow it, what I like to do is add an alert. This will let the email recipient know that they're getting close to the amount spent that you specify. In my example here, I have an amount spent of $200. And our last cost-saving measure is to use Azure reservations. When we use an Azure reservation, we can prepay for 1 or 3 years of service on certain Azure resources, such as virtual machines or SQL database compute. By using a reservation, we can save up to 75% on the pay-as-you-go subscription. The key to any Azure implementation is planning, and that includes estimating and predicting your costs. Once that solution is up and running, then managing those costs will be critical to avoid sticker shock.